My name is Delphine Castillo. I'm 29 years old. 6 years ago, I missed the business meeting that could have changed my entire career because my parents needed the car for my brother's gym session. On the morning it happened, my father stood in front of the garage and said, "Marcus has a training block booked at 9. Yours can wait." My mother added, "It's just a meeting, Delphine. Priorities." I stood there with my presentation folder shaking in my hands, watching them back out of the driveway without me. Then my brother rolled down the window and said one thing I never forgot. What he said that morning would come back to him in ways he never saw coming. And when my parents finally learned the truth 6 years later, our entire family didn't just break, it collapsed. If you're watching this right now, please hit subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I read every single one. But first, let me take you back to the beginning of being invisible in my own family. I need you to understand something about my family before I tell you what happened that morning. We weren't poor. We weren't uneducated. We looked perfectly normal from the outside. My father, Rafael Castillo, ran a small commercial real estate brokerage out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. Steady income, a house in a good part of town, 2 kids, a boat he took out on weekends. On paper we were fine. But inside that house there was a system and I was never on the winning side of it. My brother Marcus was 3 years younger than me, but from the moment he could walk, my parents treated him like the family's one real investment. He wasn't especially disciplined in school. He wasn't especially ambitious about anything beyond his own physique. But he had a certain confidence about him, the kind of presence that made my parents believe he was destined for something big, even when there was no evidence to support it. If I brought home a B, my mother asked what happened. If Marcus skipped a class entirely, my father said, "He's got bigger things on his mind. Let him focus on what matters." I was the one who got a part-time job at 16 at a bookstore in downtown Albuquerque, because my parents said I needed to learn the value of $1. Marcus didn't work a single day of high school. Instead, my parents paid for a personal trainer for him starting at 17, 3 sessions a week because, as my mother put it, he needs to build discipline somewhere and the gym is where he thrives. By the time I was in high school, I understood the arithmetic of that house perfectly. Marcus's development came first. My effort came last. And somewhere around my junior year, that arithmetic started reaching into places I never expected, starting with the one thing I thought was completely mine. My future. I didn't know yet just how far my parents were willing to go to protect Marcus's routine, even at the cost of mine. That answer was still years away, and it would arrive on the one morning I could least afford it. By the time Marcus turned 18, the difference between how we were treated wasn't subtle anymore. It was built into the walls of that house. There was a shelf in our living room my mother called the achievement shelf, though Marcus had never actually achieved anything academic or professional on it. It held photos instead. Marcus flexing at a regional bodybuilding expo he'd attended as a spectator. Marcus holding a protein shaker like a trophy. Marcus standing next to his trainer at the gym, grinning like he'd just won something. My own academic awards, and there were several: a state debate tournament trophy, an honor society induction, a scholarship recognition certificate, sat in a filing cabinet in my room because my mother said the shelf was already pretty full. Marcus got a truck for his 18th birthday, brand new, financed by my parents without a second thought. I didn't get a car at all. I took the city bus to my job at the bookstore, 35 minutes each way, through my entire junior and senior year. When I asked gently if there was any way to help me get something to drive, my father said, "Marcus needs it to get to the gym on a real schedule. You're managing fine on the bus." There was no schedule that required a truck. Marcus's gym was 8 minutes from our house. In the spring of my junior year, I won a regional debate championship, beating out students from schools across the state, a result that qualified me for a national invitational. It was mentioned briefly in the local paper. Nobody in my family clipped the article. My uncle Tomas did, mailing it to me with a note that read, "I'm proud of you, sweetheart, even if nobody else says it out loud." That same spring, Marcus got suspended for 2 days after a fight broke out at a party he'd hosted while our parents were out of town. My mother marched into the situation defending him to the other family involved, insisting he'd been provoked, even though witnesses said otherwise. The consequences got quietly minimized. My father took him out for steak that weekend to, in his words, help him blow off some steam. I sat at that dinner table watching my brother get rewarded for causing a fight while I had gotten silence for a national qualification, and something inside me went very quiet and very cold. I didn't say anything. I never said anything. I just filed it away with everything else, the bus rides, the filing cabinet, the brand new truck he barely needed, and I told myself that eventually, my own effort would speak louder than their favoritism ever could. I had no idea yet how wrong that assumption would turn out to be, or how close that reckoning was about to come, on a morning that started with something as small and as ordinary as a gym session. College didn't change the arithmetic of that house. It just relocated it. I got into a strong business program at the University of New Mexico on a partial academic scholarship I'd fought for entirely on my own, covering about half my tuition. The rest I made up through loans, a part-time job at a coffee shop near campus, and every summer, unpaid work at my father's real estate brokerage back home. That arrangement started the summer after my freshman year. My father needed help with listing paperwork and client scheduling, and rather than hire someone, he simply expected me to fill the gap. Family doesn't need to be paid like outside help, Delphine. This is how you contribute while you're living under our roof during breaks. I organized property files, coordinated showings, and trained 2 seasonal hires, all without a single paycheck for 3 consecutive summers. Marcus, meanwhile, drifted through a 2-year associate's degree at a community college nearby, never once asked to contribute anything at home. When he needed money for new gym equipment, my parents handed it over without discussion. When I needed $50 for a required textbook my financial aid hadn't fully covered, my mother sighed and said, "We're a little tight this month, sweetheart. Can you make do?" I did the math one night during my junior year, unable to sleep the way I always did when the resentment got too loud to ignore. 15 hours a week for 12 weeks, 3 summers running at New Mexico's minimum wage at the time. That put my unpaid labor for my father's brokerage at just over $2,900 I'd given away for free, while Marcus hadn't worked a single unpaid hour in his life. But the money was never really the point. The point was time and how casually mine kept getting spent on other people's convenience. Marcus called constantly with what my mother framed as emergencies. His car needed jumping outside the gym. His workout partner canceled and he needed a ride to a different location. And every time the solution was the same. "Delphine, can you run over there and help your brother sort this out? You're just better at handling things than he is." I drove across town more times than I could count during my junior year alone, missing study sessions, missing office hours with professors I badly needed to impress, all to fix problems that had nothing to do with me. I never once got a thank you that felt like it meant anything. I got, "You're a lifesaver," tossed off the way you'd thank someone for holding a door. By the spring of my senior year, I had landed an incredibly rare opportunity, a final in-person pitch meeting with a regional investment group in Denver, Colorado, that funded early-stage business plans developed by graduating seniors. I'd made it through 2 rounds of written submissions, and this final meeting would determine whether my business plan received seed funding. I'd spent 6 weeks preparing obsessively, turning down every family obligation I possibly could to get ready. What I didn't know, sitting in my apartment that final week rehearsing my pitch in the mirror at midnight, was that my parents were already making plans for that exact Saturday, plans that had absolutely nothing to do with me and everything to do with a gym session. The pitch meeting was scheduled for Saturday, May 4th at 10 in the morning at the investment group's office in downtown Albuquerque, close enough that they'd agreed to meet locally rather than requiring me to travel to Denver. It was the final round of a highly selective seed funding program, one that awarded working capital to exactly 6 business plans nationwide each cycle. Missed the meeting and there was no rescheduling. Their program director had made that explicitly clear in the confirmation email. In bold text I'd read at least a dozen times. Final pitch slots are fixed and cannot be moved under any circumstances due to the panel's limited availability. I had scheduled everything around that date for 6 weeks. I'd requested time off from my part-time job. I'd turned down 2 invitations from friends. I told my parents about it explicitly twice, once at Sunday dinner in April and again the Wednesday before at breakfast, where I said plainly, I need the car Saturday morning. My pitch meeting starts at 10 and if I miss it there's no makeup slot. This could fund my entire business. My mother had nodded at the time, distracted, scrolling through something on her phone. My father hadn't said anything at all, which I now understand should have worried me more than it did. That same week, I overheard part of a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. I'd come downstairs late one night for water and found my parents in the kitchen, voices low. My mother was saying something about Marcus's trainer moving his usual weekday session to Saturday morning because of a scheduling conflict at the gym. My father said, "We'll need the car free by 9:30 then. His session runs until at least 11 and he needs the ride there and back." I stood frozen on the stairs, my pitch meeting just 2 days away, listening to my own family plan around a gym session as though my final funding meeting simply didn't exist on their calendar at all. I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself surely they wouldn't actually let a workout collide with something this important, not after I'd told them twice, not after 6 weeks of preparation. I went to bed that Thursday night trying to convince myself I'd misunderstood what I'd heard. Friday evening, the night before the meeting, I laid out my clothes, packed my presentation folder and business plan copies, and went to check my phone one last time before bed. That's when I noticed a text from my mother, sent nearly 2 hours earlier, that I'd somehow missed entirely. It read simply, "Need the car tomorrow morning for your brother. Hope that's okay." My stomach dropped in a way I recognized immediately, the same feeling I'd had years earlier watching Marcus get rewarded for starting a fight while I sat there in silence. I called my mother immediately. She didn't pick up. I texted back, my hands shaking. "I have my pitch meeting tomorrow at 10. I told you about this twice. Please call me back." No response came that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my presentation folder sitting on the nightstand beside me, and something told me that whatever happened the next morning was going to be far worse than a simple scheduling conflict. I woke up at 7 even though the meeting didn't start until 10 because I hadn't really slept. I showered, dressed in the one blazer I owned, packed my folder, and walked downstairs at 8 to find the kitchen already in motion. My father was in the garage, backing the car partway out, and my mother was in the kitchen packing a gym bag with towels and a water bottle. "Dad, I need the car. My pitch meeting's at 10. I have to be there by 9:45 to check in." He glanced over his shoulder, barely pausing. "Marcus's session got moved to 9:30 this morning, kiddo. His trainer only had that one slot available. We really can't miss it, he only trains this specific guy once a week." "I told you about my meeting twice," I said, my voice climbing despite myself. "This is the final round for seed funding. There's no rescheduling. If I miss it, the entire opportunity is gone. It's just a meeting, Delphine. You can pitch again somewhere else. Marcus's training block can't just get pushed back." My mother walked in from the hallway at that exact moment, gym bag already zipped, keys dangling from her fingers like it was nothing at all. "Morning, sweetheart. Big day for your brother, his trainer's booked solid otherwise. Mom, I need the car. My meeting is in less than 2 hours." She looked at me the way you'd look at someone asking for something slightly unreasonable. "Delphine, we only have the one car working right now. Your father's is in the shop. You understand, Marcus has been looking forward to this session all week." "I've been looking forward to this pitch for 6 weeks, I said. "This isn't optional. This determines whether my entire business gets funded." That's when Marcus walked in from the living room, already dressed in gym shorts and a tank top, scrolling through his phone like the entire morning was already decided in his favor. He glanced up just long enough to say, "Relax, Delphine, it's just a meeting. You can always pitch it somewhere else next cycle." "I'm not asking you to skip your session, Marcus. I'm asking for a ride to my meeting first and then you can go." He rolled his eyes, already heading toward the door. "That doesn't even make sense timing-wise. We're already running late as it is." I looked at my mother, gym bag zipped, keys already in hand. I looked at my father standing by the garage. I looked at the clock on the kitchen wall. 8:15. I had exactly 90 minutes to get to that meeting, and every single adult in that house was treating my future like a scheduling inconvenience beneath a training block. "Please," I said, and I hated how small my voice sounded. "Please just drop me off first. It's 15 minutes out of your way, that's it." My mother's expression didn't soften at all. What she said next wasn't loud and it wasn't angry. It was worse than that. It was completely, chillingly calm, the kind of sentence that tells you exactly where you stand in a family, and it's a sentence I have never once been able to forget even 6 years later. "Delphine," my mother said, adjusting the gym bag on her shoulder, "you get one meeting like this and suddenly the whole household has to rearrange itself. Marcus's session took a week to lock in. You'll figure something out. You always do." That sentence landed harder than anything she'd said to me in years, because it wasn't cruelty, it was indifference, delivered so casually she was already walking toward the garage before she finished the last word. My father followed behind her, calling over his shoulder, "We'll be back around noon. There's cereal if you're hungry." I stood in that kitchen at 8:20, 85 minutes from a meeting I now had no way to reach, watching my family walk out to the one working car like nothing unusual was happening at all. I called a rideshare app with shaking hands, praying the fare wouldn't wipe out the $45 in my checking account. The nearest driver was 30 minutes away in a low-coverage part of the suburb. Even if the car arrived instantly, I'd have no realistic way to make check-in by 9:45. I called the investment group's front desk at 8:40. My voice cracking as I explained I might be late due to a transportation emergency. The receptionist was sympathetic but firm. "I'm so sorry, our final pitch slots really are fixed. I can pass along a message, but I don't have authority to change the schedule." I sat down on the porch steps outside, my presentation folder still clutched in my lap, and watched the driveway sit empty where our car should have been. By 9:50 I knew for certain the window had closed completely. I hadn't even made it out the front door. At noon my phone rang. An unfamiliar number with a Denver area code. I almost let it go to voicemail, assuming it was spam, but something made me answer. It was the program director himself, a man named Mr. Holloway, calling to follow up on the message the receptionist had passed along, since my file had already been flagged as a no-show for the scheduled slot. "I understand this is difficult," he said, his voice careful, "but I do want to let you know something before you go in case it changes how you want to handle this on your end." He paused for just a moment before continuing, and whatever he said next was about to determine whether that single missed meeting would define the rest of my career, or whether there was still a door left open that I hadn't even considered. Mr. Holloway explained that while the missed pitch slot itself couldn't be recovered for this funding cycle, the investment group occasionally kept a short waitlist of highly qualified candidates who'd experienced documented scheduling conflicts, and that if I could submit a written explanation along with supporting materials within 48 hours, he'd personally forward my file to the panel for consideration if any waitlist spots opened before the cycle closed. It wasn't a guarantee. It was a long shot. But it was something. A door left slightly open. "I'd need everything by Monday morning," he said. "I can't promise it'll lead anywhere, Delphine, but your written business plan was strong enough that I don't want to lose you over a scheduling issue." I thanked him, hung up, and sat on that porch step for a long time, my mind moving faster than it had all morning. I thought about the text message my mother had sent the night before, time-stamped almost 2 hours before I'd seen it. I thought about the call I'd made to the front desk at 8:40, which they'd likely have logged. I thought about writing down in detail Exactly what had happened that morning, the moved training session, the missing car, my mother's voice telling me I'd figure something out. I went inside, sat at the kitchen table and started writing. Not for my parents. For the panel. I documented everything factually without embellishment, because I understood even then that the truth alone would be damning enough. I attached the screenshot of my mother's late-night text. I attached the timestamp of my call to the front desk. I submitted it Sunday night, less than 24 hours later, with steady hands and a strange, cold clarity I hadn't expected to feel. My parents got home from the gym that Saturday around 1 in the afternoon, Marcus recounting some story about hitting a new personal record on the bench press. Nobody asked me how the meeting went. Nobody asked at all. I finally said it myself, standing in the doorway. I missed it. I never made it there. My mother's face flickered with something that might have been guilt, gone almost as quickly as it appeared. I'm sure there'll be other opportunities, sweetheart. It's not the end of the world. Marcus, still catching his breath from the session, said, "See, told you it wasn't that big a deal," and walked past me toward the kitchen like the conversation was already over. That was the moment something in me finally, permanently closed. Not with anger, not with a scene, just a quiet, absolute understanding that nothing I built in that house would ever be treated as real until it directly benefited someone else. I didn't announce anything. I didn't argue. I went upstairs that same night, pulled my old duffel bag from the closet and started packing. Clothes for a week. My laptop. The folder with my waitlist submission. $130 in cash I'd saved from tips at the coffee shop. I didn't know yet whether that waitlist submission would actually work, whether a spot would open before the funding cycle closed, or whether I'd just spent my last shot on nothing. All I knew, standing in that room zipping up a bag while my family celebrated a personal record downstairs, was that I was leaving that house, and I had absolutely no idea it would be 6 full years before I set foot in it again. I left the following morning before anyone else woke up, took a bus to my friend Soline's apartment near campus, and slept on her couch for 11 days while I waited to hear back on the wait list. Soline never asked too many questions. She just handed me a blanket the first night and said, "Stay as long as you need." Mr. Halloway called on a Thursday afternoon, 11 days after I'd submitted my materials, a call I must have replayed 15 times before it fully registered. A spot had opened unexpectedly when another candidate's business plan fell through underwriting, and given my documented circumstances and strong written submission from the earlier rounds, the panel had approved a video pitch instead of requiring an in-person visit. I did that pitch from Soline's living room 3 days later, and by that Monday I had the offer. Seed funding of $32,000 to launch my business. A compliance consulting service for small commercial property owners, something I'd built the entire plan around during my final year of school. It wasn't the exact meeting I'd originally lost, but it was the same funding source, the same panel, and the same door I'd thought had closed forever on that porch step. I finished my final semester of college that spring, walked at graduation with almost no family present, my Uncle Tomas the only one who showed up, sitting alone in the audience holding a small bouquet of grocery store flowers. I moved to Denver, Colorado 3 weeks after graduation, mostly because the investment group was based there and several of my earliest clients came through their network. I packed everything I owned into a rented sedan and drove 6 hours north with $180 in my checking account and absolutely no plan beyond surviving the first month's rent. The first year in Denver was brutal in ways I hadn't fully prepared for. I worked long hours, ate cheap food and called my parents maybe twice in 12 months, both times briefly, both times circling back somehow to updates about Marcus, who had drifted into a personal training certification he never finished, followed by a brief stint managing the front desk at his own gym that lasted 4 months before he was let go for what my mother vaguely described as a personality conflict with ownership. I threw myself into building my client base in the evenings, cold calling small property owners across the Denver metro area, using every connection the investment group offered that almost nobody else in my funding cohort bothered to use. Within 18 months, I had 11 steady clients, and by the time I finished my second year in Denver, I had something no one in my family had ever handed me. A business entirely my own, built without a single hour of help. I hired my first employee that same year, a compliance analyst named Bruno, and watched my client base double within 12 months. My mentor from the investment group, a sharp, plain-spoken woman named Genevieve Okonkwo, pulled me aside at a networking event and said, "You work like someone who's trying to prove something. What's the story there?" I told her only part of it, that I'd had a setback once and didn't plan on having another. What I didn't tell her, because I didn't fully understand it myself yet, was that the setback I'd survived was about to become the exact foundation for something far bigger than either of us could have predicted that evening, something that would eventually put my own name on a door, and put my brother, of all people, on the other side of it. Hiring Bruno changed the trajectory of everything, though it took 2 more years before I fully understood how much. I specialized in commercial property compliance and risk auditing almost by accident, after landing a contract to untangle a regulatory mess for a client nobody else in Denver's small consulting scene wanted to touch. It was detailed, painstaking work, and I was good at it in a way that quietly surprised the property owners who'd underestimated me at first glance. By 2022, 4 years after I'd arrived in Denver with $180 and no plan, I was managing compliance audits for property portfolios worth more than my father's entire brokerage combined. In early 2023, Genevieve pulled me aside at another networking event and told me something that changed everything again. She was stepping back from active investing to focus on board work, and she wanted to know if I'd ever consider scaling my consulting practice into something bigger, because in her words, "You've outgrown being a one-woman operation, Delphine. You built a real business without anyone handing you the tools." I spent the next year building out a formal firm structure in every spare hour I had, meeting with potential clients quietly, reinvesting nearly all my profits, and in September of 2024, I officially launched Castillo Compliance Group, a full-service consultancy specializing in regulatory auditing for commercial property owners across the Mountain West, with exactly 3 employees, myself, Bruno, and 1 junior analyst I'd recruited from a rival firm. I want to be honest about how demanding that first year of formal operations was. I reinvested nearly everything I'd saved into the firm's growth. I worked 80-hour weeks. But slowly, one client at a time, one referral at a time, Castillo Compliance Group started to grow. By 2025, we'd expanded to 9 employees and moved into a proper office space in downtown Denver, with my name etched into the glass door in simple black lettering. I remember standing in front of that door the day the sign went up, thinking about the girl who'd sat on a porch step outside Albuquerque 6 years earlier, watching a car pull out of the driveway without her. I kept my personal life quiet during those years. I visited home exactly twice, both for brief obligatory holidays, keeping the conversations shallow and short. Marcus, meanwhile, had drifted through 3 more roles since the pitch meeting: a sales position at a supplement store, a brief and unsuccessful attempt at becoming an online fitness influencer that never gained traction, and a short stint doing equipment sales for a gym chain that closed within the year. My mother described each attempt to relatives as though he were on the verge of something enormous, and each time within months, the story quietly disappeared. By the start of 2026, my firm had grown to 13 employees, a client roster that included 2 regional property management companies, and a reputation in Denver's business community that I had built entirely without a single dollar or hour of help from the family that once told me a gym session mattered more than my future. I had no idea, sitting in my office reviewing that year's hiring plan for a new compliance operations manager position, that the next application to land on my desk would carry a name I hadn't seen in almost 6 years, and that opening that file would be the moment everything I thought I'd left behind in Albuquerque came walking straight back through my front door. It was a Wednesday morning in February of 2026, and I was at my desk reviewing applications for a compliance operations manager opening we'd posted 2 weeks earlier. We'd received just over 60 applications by then, and I was scrolling through them the way I did every morning, coffee going cold beside me, when a name near the bottom of the list stopped me completely. Marcus Castillo. I sat there for a moment, absolutely certain it had to be a coincidence, another Marcus Castillo somewhere in Colorado. But when I clicked into the file, the resume loaded and the photo attached to it was unmistakable, more muscular, older, but unmistakably my brother. I scrolled down to his work history and my stomach tightened before I'd even finished reading the first line. Compliance Operations Associate, Sunridge Property Partners, Albuquerque, New Mexico, listed for a period of nearly 3 years, spanning almost exactly the years I now knew he'd actually spent drifting between the supplement store, the failed fitness influencer attempt, and the gym equipment sales job that had closed within the year. Underneath it, a list of duties that read like something copied directly from a job description template. Managed property compliance documentation. Coordinated regulatory audit scheduling. Improved reporting accuracy through streamlined tracking systems. I searched Sunridge Property Partners in New Mexico's business registry. Nothing. No such company existed or had ever existed in the state. My hands went still on the keyboard. I scrolled down to his references, half already knowing what I was going to find before I got there. First reference listed, Rafael Castillo, description simply, former supervisor. My own father listed as a professional reference for a compliance job at a company that had never existed, for work that, as far as I could tell, sounded suspiciously close to the exact kind of listing and audit coordination work I had done, unpaid, for 3 summers running at my father's real brokerage years before Marcus had ever touched a spreadsheet in his life. I sat back in my chair, the applicant file still glowing on my screen, and felt something cold and clear settle over me. The same clarity I'd felt 6 years earlier sitting on that porch step watching the driveway sit empty. Our firm's hiring protocol required full employment verification on every finalist before any offer went out. No exceptions, a policy I had personally written into our onboarding procedures the year we launched. I had 2 options sitting in front of me. Recuse myself entirely, flag the conflict of interest, and hand the file to someone else on my team. Or follow protocol exactly the way I would for any other candidate and let the verification process reveal whatever it was going to reveal. I thought about the missing car that morning. I thought about the personal record on the bench press. I thought about my mother's voice telling me I'd figure something out, and my father telling me it wasn't that big a deal. I picked up the office phone and dialed the first number listed for Sunridge Property Partners, and as it began to ring, I had absolutely no idea that the voice about to answer on the other end was going to confirm something far worse than I had even suspected. The number rang twice and then disconnected entirely, the flat, dead tone confirming what the business registry search had already told me. Sunridge Property Partners didn't exist. I searched further, cross-referencing the exact address listed on Marcus's resume, and found it belonged to a UPS mailbox rental store in Albuquerque, the kind of address anyone could rent for $20 a month to make a fictional company look real on paper. I called my father's actual brokerage next, the real business back in Albuquerque where I had organized listings and coordinated showings for free 3 summers running. His longtime office manager, a woman named Josefina who'd worked there since before I was born, picked up on the second ring. I gave her my professional title and explained I was conducting a standard employment verification for a candidate named Marcus Castillo. There was a long pause. Delphine, is that really you, Mija? Her voice softened and then shifted the moment she processed what I was actually asking. Marcus never worked here in any official capacity, sweetheart. You know that better than anyone. You were the one doing that listing work every summer, not him. I asked her directly whether she was aware of any arrangement where my father might have agreed to serve as a reference for a job Marcus had never actually held. She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. I don't know anything about that specifically. But Delphine, I remember exactly whose hands were on those property files, and it wasn't your brother's. I thanked her, hung up, and then dialed my father directly at his office line, not identifying myself right away, simply stating I was conducting a routine verification call for an applicant. I'm calling to verify employment for Marcus Castillo, I said, listed as a compliance operations associate at Sunridge Property Partners in Albuquerque, for approximately 3 years. Can you confirm those details as his former supervisor? There was a pause on the line longer than I expected. Yes, that's correct. He did excellent work. Very detail-oriented, very reliable. And during that same period, did anyone else in your family perform similar compliance or listing coordination duties at your company? Another pause, this one longer still. No. Just Marcus. That was the lie that confirmed everything. As I had existed. I had been there, unpaid, for 3 full summers, doing exactly the kind of work now attributed to a brother who had spent that same window bouncing between a supplement store and an unfinished influencer career. I still had old text messages from my mother asking me to cover showings. I had a shoebox of pay stubs that didn't exist because I'd never been paid at all. I had 6 years of silence that had just been broken by one confirmed, deliberate lie. I thanked my father, still without revealing who I was, and ended the call. I sat there for a long moment afterward, my hands steady in a way that almost surprised me. I wasn't shaking the way I had on that porch step 6 years earlier. I felt something closer to certainty. I wrote one line in Marcus's applicant file. Employment verification failed. Listed employer does not exist. Recommend in-person interview to address directly. Then I picked up my phone and scheduled that interview myself for the following Monday, with absolutely no idea that the moment my brother walked through our office door, he would have no idea at all whose name was on the glass above it. I scheduled Marcus's interview through our standard applicant portal, the same way I would for anyone else. Dear Marcus, thank you for your application to the Compliance Operations Manager position at Castillo Compliance Group. We would like to invite you for an in-person interview on Monday at 10 in the morning at our Denver office. You will meet with Delphine Castillo, founder and managing director, and Genevieve Okonkwo, senior advisor. He replied within the hour. Awesome, see you then. No recognition at all, not of the company name, not of mine, nothing. 6 years of near silence between us, and he genuinely hadn't connected the dots. I told Genevieve everything the day before, the fake company, the fabricated references, my father confirming the lie over the phone. She listened without interrupting, then said only, "You lead it. I'll sit in as a witness." Monday morning I sat in our conference room watching the lobby through the glass wall. At 9:58 Marcus walked in wearing an ill-fitting blazer stretched tight across his shoulders, portfolio tucked under his arm, looking heavier and more tired than the version of him I remembered from that kitchen 6 years ago. He checked in at the front desk and I walked out to meet him myself. He looked up, saw my face and froze completely. "Delphine, what are you doing here?" "I own this firm," I said. "Please follow me." He followed, visibly rattled, into the conference room where Genevieve was already seated. I took the center chair and gestured for him to sit across from us. "Let's get started," I said, my voice calm. "Walk us through your resume." The first few minutes were standard questions about software, about audit procedures. Marcus answered nervously but adequately. Then I leaned forward. "I see you worked at Sunridge Property Partners in Albuquerque for nearly 3 years. Tell me about that role." "Yeah, compliance work, property audits, documentation, that kind of thing. Small company but solid experience. I called to verify that employment last week," I said. "There's no business registered under that name anywhere in New Mexico. The address on your resume is a mailbox rental store. I also called Dad's actual brokerage. Josefina still works there. She confirmed you never held a formal position doing that work." Marcus's face drained of color. "I helped out sometimes. Around the office. It counts for something." "You did none of that work," I said. "I did every hour of it for 3 summers, unpaid, while you were still training for a bodybuilding expo you never even competed in. Every duty on this resume is my labor with your name attached to it." He started to argue, voice rising, when Genevieve's phone lit up on the table between us. A message confirming what our applicants signed consent to on every final round interview for compliance-sensitive roles. The entire conversation, every word of it, was already being recorded for our internal audit file. And Marcus had signed that consent form himself, 3 days earlier, without reading a single line of it. It's been almost a year now since that Monday morning in the conference room. Castillo Compliance Group has grown to 17 employees. We brought on a new compliance operations manager that spring, someone with an honest resume and real references, and the role has nothing to do with what happened before it. I heard through my uncle Tomas that Marcus is working the front desk at a different gym now, outside Albuquerque. I don't know much beyond that, and I've stopped asking. My father sent a text on my birthday this year for words, "Thinking of you, kiddo." I didn't answer right away. I'm still not sure if I answered out of forgiveness or just habit. I think about that morning in the kitchen sometimes, the gym bag zipped and ready, the presentation folder I never got to use. For years I believed missing that meeting meant I wasn't capable of the life I wanted. It took me a long time to understand it was never about capability at all. It was about a family that had already decided long before that Saturday whose morning mattered and whose didn't. I don't know if my parents will ever fully understand what they did, that morning or in the years of silence that followed it. But I've stopped waiting for that understanding to arrive before I let myself move forward. I built a firm without their permission once already. I know exactly how to keep building without it. If you've ever been the one expected to wait, to give, to disappear quietly while someone else got the comfort, I hope this reached you today. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, and if this story meant something to you, hit subscribe. There are more stories like this coming. Thank you for listening.